Good morning, and welcome to the Global Energy Institute's EnergyInnovates series, where we convene experts to discuss the innovation that is driving America's energy future. Today, we're exploring the opportunity for nuclear energy to continue as a cornerstone of a cleaner energy future. We're pleased to again be joined by representatives from the Department of Energy, from Congress, and from the business community to discuss the importance of our existing nuclear energy fleet, the development of cutting-edge reactors, and the accompanying policies necessary to facilitate greater investment, permitting, and deployment of emissions-free baseload nuclear. But first, we'd like to share a short message from our sponsor of EnergyInnovates, Siemens Energy.
If the one constant in life is change, shouldn't we all change for the better? Let's champion the energy transformation. Why can't global challenges become opportunities? Let's make our ideas a reality. What if an idea became a solution for millions? Let's transform our natural resources. Shouldn't reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy be for all? Let's see people as the catalysts of real change. Isn't it time we harnessed our collective energy? Let's galvanize change in our homes and offices and industries. Because shouldn't our technology serve us today and tomorrow? Let's energize society.
And now to kick things off, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Catherine Huff, Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Nuclear Energy at DOE. Prior to this role, she was an assistant professor in the Department of Nuclear, Plasma, and Radiological Engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she led the Advanced Reactors and Fuel Cycles Research Group. She was also a Blue Waters Assistant Professor with the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. With a degree in physics from the University of Chicago and a PhD in nuclear engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, her research focused on modeling and simulation of advanced nuclear reactors and fuel cycles. So thank you for joining us this morning, Dr. Huff. So a central focus of our series has been the Energy Act of 2020 and its critical role in supporting the development of technologies needed to effectively address climate change. The Comprehensive Nuclear Energy Leadership Act was part of that bill that DOE is now in the process of implementing. We're pleased that President Biden requested a record high $1.8 billion for the Office of Nuclear Energy for 2022. And in fact, earlier this week, the House Appropriations Committee took the first step toward funding that request with the markup of its energy and water bill. I'd like to think this is building momentum behind what could be a historic period for nuclear energy. So with that in mind, can you share your vision and priorities for the Office of Nuclear Energy and what this moment could mean not only for revitalizing the U.S. nuclear industry, but also for ensuring an effective response to climate change?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. President Biden is committed to getting this country powered by clean energy, and it's going to take every single clean energy tool available. It's the only way we're going to reach our ambitious goals of 50% reduction in our carbon emissions by the end of the decade, 100% clean energy by 2035, and a net zero economy by 2050. Secretary Granholm has also said it loud and clear: carbon-free nuclear power is an absolutely critical part of our decarbonization equation. In terms of priorities for the Office of Nuclear Energy, first and foremost, the preservation of the existing fleet in the United States is essential to our climate goals. Second, the deployment of new advanced reactor types will underpin our continued leadership in nuclear technology and our needed direction in the context of climate action. Finally, it's only possible if DOE makes progress in the context of an environmentally and energy-just consent-based siting process for interim and eventually permanent spent nuclear fuel storage. Our innovative technologies are not only needed in the US, but also globally. Climate change is a global challenge, which opens up opportunities for all of you in the international market, but we have a lot more work to do. Innovate here, build here, and deploy these nuclear technologies everywhere. That should be our goal. Developing new and enhancing current relationships is going to accelerate the export of US nuclear energy technologies, and this means good paying American jobs in high-tech manufacturing.
Great. So let's zero in on an issue that I know it's been a priority for the Chamber and many of the allied organizations, and that's the demonstration of advanced reactor designs. So NELA and the Energy Act of 2020 directed DOE to move forward on a very specific moonshot goal. That is to demonstrate 2 new full-scale reactors in a matter of a few years to prepare them for commercial deployment. So when we think about the advanced safety and efficiency features of these new reactor designs, such as passive safety, less spent fuel, ability to have greater grid flexibility, it's clear there's a lot of promise. So help us understand why this program is so important, and maybe provide a status for the advanced reactor demonstration projects as well.
Well, in the context of why it's so important, these advanced reactor concepts offer really significant potential benefits compared to existing nuclear technologies. We're expecting them to have lower construction and operating costs, enhanced safety and security, greater resource utilization, and easier operations. These advantages will allow nuclear to help America meet the Biden administration's ambitious goals. Again, 100% clean energy by 2035 and net zero emissions by 2050. Those are big goals, and they're going to require advanced nuclear. The Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program that you mentioned was launched in 2020, and it focuses on the construction of these advanced demonstration reactors. They should be affordable to both build and operate, and we are planning to invest a total of $3.2 billion over 7 years in ARDP. This is subject, of course, to the availability of future appropriations, but these are partners with industry, and DOE is providing matching funds. The Biden administration and Secretary Granholm are all in to ensure these demonstrations really cross the finish line. And because the ARDP program is helping the department address the need to develop a broad spectrum of reactor designs on the technology maturity continuum to generate advanced commercial energy generation options for both domestic and international power suppliers. These will have improved capabilities beyond the current fleet and strengthen the market for nuclear energy. They will show that nuclear can be affordable and safe, and that we can stimulate the development of domestic nuclear fuel infrastructure for those advanced reactors, as well as the nuclear component manufacturing and fabrication enterprise that is going to be needed to support that fleet of advanced reactors. We have finalized awards with the 2 demonstration reactor awardees. They are X-Energy and TerraPower, and we are actively funding those projects. They've gotten started, and while it's still early in the project life cycle, these 2 companies are already making significant progress in the design, engineering, and licensing of these technologies, and they have met scheduled milestones established in their respective awards. Now, I know that the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program enjoys support from both sides of the aisle, and that's the way it should be. But we should want all our neighbors and communities to have access to the clean energy that leaves our children healthier, our planet safer, our wallets fuller, and our homes more reliably powered. This program is just one step, though, in that direction.
Well, great. Thanks for that update, and we really do appreciate the partnership that the agency has entered into with the private sector on those programs. So, on a related issue, building first of a kind advanced reactor, brings inherent engineering challenges, and with nuclear materials, those can grow exponentially. So DOE previously announced plans to build a versatile test reactor to develop and test the fuels, materials, and instrumentation for the next generation of reactors. Can you help our audience understand why this platform is important, and perhaps share an update on that program as well?
Yeah, one of the top priorities of NE is to support industry in expanding the footprint of U.S. technology exports, and that's in line with the entire Department of Energy. Our goal for U.S. innovative nuclear technologies, again, will be to innovate here and build here, but deploy everywhere. We recognize the critical role that government plays in leveraging these bilateral relationships to develop our civil cooperation, and it takes strong cooperative agreements, including intergovernmental agreements and technical expertise collaboration to bolster these commercial opportunities. We have found that leveraging the strategic partnership that overlays commercial engagement from the outset, as is in the case with Poland or Romania, helps to facilitate the policy, financial, technical discussions needed to move these projects forward. And my office continues to work closely with our U.S. industry partners to review desired market opportunities, focus specific engagement, build in-country regional leaders, and we've long recognized the need to formalize discussions on industry's priority countries, and we're pleased to be leading efforts in coordination with the Office of International Affairs to have working level discussions with industry associations to better understand how we might move forward our efforts in a coordinated manner. Now, DOE support for demonstrating advanced reactors like the ARDP demonstration reactors will ensure that these technologies become a reality and can be exported globally. Not only will this lead to jobs in the US, but also to allow the United States to have a key voice in shaping the global safety and security norms for these technologies. Now, in the context of the VTR, as we think about that long-term international perspective, we recognize that innovation really requires a robust nuclear energy research and development infrastructure. A missing and essential component is a high-flux, fast-spectrum test reactor, and that will be filled by the VTR, the Versatile Test Reactor. By building on existing designs and proven fuel forms, VTR will provide a reliable state-of-the-art facility for US industries to perform accelerated tool testing of fuels, materials, instrumentation and sensors, and it should be able in that way also to support the existing fleet. VTR will also provide a useful platform to support regulatory R&D and the testing needs of our allies. Congress authorized the VTR through NEICA, NEICA, and the Energy Act of 2020, as you mentioned. The administration has requested funding for VTR that will provide this capability for long-term innovation and restoration of our global leadership of nuclear energy. Integrating our planning for this important test facility is essential to the goals of the ARDP. We're very hopeful that President Biden's budget request will be fulfilled, especially in the context of the VTR.
Great. Well, let's turn the focus on a global scale for a moment. And it's no secret in recent decades the U.S. has fallen behind global competitors such as Russia and China when it comes to the health of our nuclear enterprise. But as we've discussed, it feels that could be starting to change. So can you comment on the importance of the U.S. government and U.S. business regaining that leadership position on nuclear energy, and discuss how some of DOE's programs will help enable that?
Yeah, and I kind of touched on this in the context of the VTR because ultimately, those kinds of programs do come back to our ability to compete and to contribute to our international collaborations. It is especially including those international agreements and technical expertise that underpin our commercial opportunities. Those direct supportive activities for our US companies allow us to leverage strategic partnerships and facilitate these technical discussions as they need to move the projects forward. Our US industry partners do a lot. They build in-country regional leaders. Our office works on focused country engagement that identifies energy analysis and technical reviews that's needed to advance those countries' market readiness and to formalize discussions on our industry's priority countries, as we said. In coordination with the DOE's Office of International Affairs, of course, we support a lot of reactor innovations, moving from building and deploying here to building everywhere. And so we're really hopeful that projects, not just for commercialization in the United States, can be exported out into other nations, in particular through these cooperative and intergovernmental agreements that we already have in place and that we are currently working on. I would definitely keep an eye on both Poland and Romania in this context.
Great. Well, bringing it back home here, we've talked a lot about next generation of nuclear reactors, but obviously our existing fleet is enormously important to our clean energy future, and with fewer than 100 reactors meeting 20% of entire U.S. electricity demand. So can you share with us the programs your office is pursuing that would enhance the competitiveness and longevity of the existing fleet?
Yeah, the existing fleet is so essential. U.S. reactors generate 20% of our electricity, and that's more than half of our carbon-free power, so we really absolutely have to find ways to keep them up and running. This is why President Biden has requested $175 million to make today's fleet more cost-effective to operate and maintain. This $175 million does include $115 million to develop and deploy new improved fuels that will both improve performance and reduce cost in existing reactors. Those accident-tolerant fuels have a great deal of promise. Through the Light Water Reactor Sustainability Program, we are also working to ensure the long-term economic viability of our existing nuclear fleet by partnering with industry to develop the technical basis for continued reliable, resilient, and economic operation of the current fleet of plants. That LWRS program also really supports the existing nuclear fleet in demonstrating expanded products using the electricity or heat produced by the reactor to create new revenue streams, such as hydrogen, or even to direct, the use of the heat for industrial applications in the future. This will be a really powerful tool in improving those economics for the existing fleet and for achieving our goal of a net zero emission economy by 2050, which includes so much more than just electricity. One example demonstration of this work is a joint program at Davis-Besse, where hydrogen produced by nuclear energy will be used to power buses in the Toledo municipal fleet. So there are some really important proposals in the American Jobs Plan that support the existing fleet. So not only is it going to establish an energy efficiency and clean energy standard, but it also proposes an allocated production credit for electricity generated from eligible existing nuclear power facilities. And this, I hope, can help solve the nuclear plant retirement issue. Passing this plan is crucial to saving our fleet and preserving thousands of high-paying jobs.
Great. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull in one audience question, and that was how does the development of domestic uranium play into the department's goals here?
Yeah, so the development of a domestic uranium supply chain for high-assay LEU in particular is going to deeply underpin the success or failure, frankly, of our demonstration of advanced nuclear reactors. Particularly, the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program seeks to build out those supply chains. For example, the supply chain for high-assay LEU in the process of demonstrating those first few reactors. And by building out those supply chains, we make the chicken and egg problem of advanced reactors not being able to start without advanced reactor fuel, and advanced reactor fuel not having a market without advanced reactors existing in the marketplace. We can solve that chicken and egg problem through the demonstration program and a HALEU availability supply chain approach, where we will make sure that the fuel supply chain will support these demo reactors and kickstart the HALEU availability and other uranium supply chains, in particular for our next generation fleet of advanced reactors.
Great. No, I appreciate the answer. Thank you. So in closing, you've helped us identify some of the key milestones and priorities for nuclear energy. So final thoughts or messages for all the different nuclear stakeholders who are watching here on how we can best help achieve those goals.
Yeah, well, as we talked about today, nuclear has really enjoyed some strong bipartisan support. And we're going to need all of that support as President Biden pursues the rest of his clean energy agenda, especially with the American Jobs Plan and his infrastructure framework. With this, the administration will see that if we can launch more nuclear energy demonstration projects across the country, put them in communities, we can stand to gain the greatest benefit from clean energy sources and electricity. And those high quality jobs that they'll create will be an investment in the future. And it will require investing billions into research, development, and manufacturing of advanced nuclear energy. But we need our nuclear energy leaders standing up and speaking out if we're going to get this proposal over the finish line for our budget. So we're looking forward to that success.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Huff, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We look forward to working with you as you pursue all the goals of the program there. And again, just thank you on behalf of the entire audience here.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to welcome Representative Elaine Luria of Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. The Congresswoman serves as Vice Chair of the House Armed Services Committee and also serves on the Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security Committees. Perhaps more importantly for today's conversation, though, she served 2 decades in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear-trained surface warfare officer. So thank you for joining us this morning. With your very unique background among members of Congress, Can you give us your personal perspective on nuclear power as a clean and safe energy source and how that shaped your views for the policy debates in Congress?
Well, first, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join in this important conversation about the future of energy and specifically focusing on nuclear energy. Like you mentioned, I served in the Navy for 20 years, both as a surface warfare officer and as a nuclear engineer, so operating nuclear reactors on aircraft carriers, by the way, including Enterprise, which has 8 nuclear reactors. But the safe operation of nuclear reactors, both by the Navy and the Navy's nuclear power program, and for our civilian electrical sources, I think is very important when we look at trying to cut CO2 emissions in the future. Obviously, wind and solar are important elements of that, but the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, and I think that including more nuclear and especially advanced nuclear technologies in the future is very important. I've tried to be a very strong advocate of that, both last Congress and this term as well, and I'm very excited to see a lot of the new developments, the demonstration reactors that are being planned and built, and want to continue to be a strong voice for the nuclear energy sector.
Wonderful. Well, you touched on it a bit, but perhaps I ask you to maybe expand and see what you see as the importance of nuclear energy as a solution set on climate, not only here in the U.S., but around the world.
Well, there's several aspects to that. The first, I think, is the ability to use nuclear power the source that would reduce CO2 emissions. Here in Virginia, where I live, in this service area for Dominion Energy, about 40% of our power is already produced by nuclear. And I think that it would be great to champion that more, to talk more about how nuclear energy, which is our largest source of clean energy, is providing that clean nuclear power in so many parts of the country already. And as we transition, there's older technologies that are currently in use, very large scale pressurized water reactors using essentially 1960s technology. There's a lot new happening, developments with new types of fuel, as well as new types of reactor technology for small modular reactors. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there to expand nuclear across the country and for the U.S. to be a leader around the world in nuclear technologies.
Right. Well, to that, last year Congress passed the Energy Act of 2020. It's a bill that we believe is arguably the most significant climate and energy legislation enacted in decades. Now, it's a critical part of that, and a critical part of that package was the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, or NELA. You were a tireless advocate for that bill, which encourages innovation in the design and deployment of advanced nuclear reactor technologies. And your leadership, we know, helped build support among Democrats and Republicans. So I wonder if you could help our audience understand why NELA is so important. And perhaps give us your thoughts on what's necessary to ensure that we not only maximize its implementation, but in terms of funding for the program, but are there other companion bills or other things that need to be done, for example, in the authorizing of power purchase agreements and the like?
Well, certainly. So the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act was introduced both in the Senate. Senator Murkowski had the lead in the Senate. I introduced the House version on a bipartisan basis and really started to try to increase enthusiasm behind the nuclear energy on both sides of the aisle. And I'll say a good point is, as we've moved across the last 2.5 years that I've been in the House, I've found increased interest in nuclear energy when talking about climate. So the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, it included provisions for increasing a university-level study program to increase expertise in engineering research in nuclear reactors. It also provided funding for 2 reactor demonstration projects, and we were able to provide a considerable amount of funding towards nuclear energy in both the 2020 and 2021 appropriations packages. Overall, the legislation provided $1.5 billion for nuclear energy initiatives, and I would say that as we look towards a infrastructure package in this Congress, part of the bipartisan group that has put together the framework for the bipartisan infrastructure package that we're negotiating now, a significant amount of resources are proposed to go towards nuclear energy initiatives. So I continue to try to be a champion for that. And also a special committee was set up last Congress, the Special Committee for the Climate Crisis, to look at the different elements of the changes in climate. And I've been a very strong voice, and it was included in last Congress's report as well, to make sure that nuclear was mentioned and considered as a future part of the solution to climate related to energy and CO2 emissions.
Well, it's really been great to see the continued support for nuclear energy and the research and innovation, both in Congress and the administration.
Given your nuclear Navy background and your perch as Vice Chair of House Armed Services Committee, and I should also add your role in the Homeland Security Committee, can you discuss the role of nuclear energy in national security and geopolitics, particularly as we look to develop and export advanced nuclear reactor designs around the world, and as we think about competition from countries like China and Russia?
Well, certainly. And, this is interesting because this is really the element that brought me into this conversation as far as nuclear power and advancing nuclear technology in the U.S. I attended an event, I had the opportunity to speak at length with the late Senator John Warner about this topic. And really the focus of that conversation was about the fact that our competitors, China and Russia, are exporting nuclear technology around the world. And it's very important, I think, for the U.S. to not allow China and Russia to excel beyond the U.S. as far as the ability to provide that nuclear technology to other countries, to be involved in those developments. And specifically, China, I think, is using that as a tool in advancing these energy projects in other countries. They're creating huge amounts of debt that these other countries would not be able to essentially ever fulfill. And thus, political and economic influence in those areas. So I think that nuclear technology is very important for U.S. to maintain its security position in the world as well as economic. And it is very important as well when we look at non-proliferation issues that U.S. technology be the leading technology for nuclear power around the world. So it really was from a national security perspective that I came to learn, because I think many people are maybe not aware of all of the advancements, all the research and development that has been going on in recent years with regards to new nuclear technology, new types of fuel. And that sort of brought me into this conversation, made me aware of the efforts that were ongoing with NELA. And then I sought to continue to advocate for it, specifically for the national security impact of it and also for the climate impact of it as well.
Excellent. Well, I know you also serve as co-chair of the New Democratic Coalition Climate Change Task Force. So kind of in closing, let me get, what are your thoughts on the year ahead and what we should expect or be looking for from Congress in terms of energy and climate policy? And I guess that is in two different ways here. Number one, as you're aware, there are those who are critical of nuclear technology. So I think you've answered a lot of this in the rest of your responses today on how you address that. But what you might see is how you manage your colleagues that may have questions or concerns. And then finally, what can the business community do to help keep momentum going and assure continued bipartisan support for nuclear energy?
Well, great. Well, a few questions there. For the starting point is I plan to continue to be a very strong advocate for nuclear power. And I would say that advocacy, along with some of my colleagues in the Democratic caucus, has really grown over the last 2.5 years. And I have heard many people who I would have never suspected just a year ago when talking about new energy sources, mentioning not only wind and solar, but also the possibilities of nuclear. So I think what industry is doing to introduce lawmakers to those new types of technology, how they're safer, how they produce less waste, easing some of the concerns that people have just anecdotally in their mind from the older forms of nuclear power and the different things that have happened in the past relative to those types of reactors is very important. So I think having that conversation, familiarizing lawmakers with all of the great advancements that are happening in nuclear power is very important. I would say that moving forward, probably the biggest impact for energy would be what we can do in an infrastructure package. I'm very enthusiastic about a bipartisan infrastructure package, and I've been part of the caucus in the House, the problem solvers that helped develop that framework, working with our colleagues in the Senate, and hope to move that forward. But it has a sizable investment. I know the numbers are still under development, but a very sizable investment in the future of energy in the country, of which nuclear power is a component of that. So I think that is a very important way to advocate for advanced nuclear power and increased investments in that sector.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I know that, just be clear that we know you are also a strong supporter, and your district is home to a lot of offshore wind. So we want to appreciate your continued focus on energy innovation in many different ways. But we very much appreciate your support for nuclear technology, the role you play not only in the energy debate, but as part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, as you mentioned. And of course, thank you very much again for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, as we've seen, much of the recent policy discussion about nuclear power has focused on the next generation of reactors. However, there's an increasing focus on the existing fleet, which has been and continues to be the grid's emissions-free workhorse. Now, to discuss that, we are joined by Brian Hanson, the Executive Vice President and Chief Generation Officer at Exelon. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Now, Exelon is one of the largest utilities in the U.S., supplying electricity and gas to millions of households and businesses in many states. And it also has a historically unique generation portfolio and business model. Since much of our audience aren't exactly electricity sector analysts, can you give us a little background on Exelon's footprint and its focus on providing clean, affordable, and reliable energy?
Yeah, good morning, Chris, and thanks for having me this morning. You know, Exelon is a Fortune 100 company that operates in every stage of the energy business, both from power generation to competitive energy sales to the transmission and delivery of electricity and gas in major urban areas. Really, three families of businesses. Our utility company, 7 major utilities that operate and serve major urban cities like Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, the District of Columbia, Atlantic City, and Delaware is one segment of the business. 10 million customers that our utilities serve there. We have a generation arm of our company that encompasses 31,000 megawatts of generation, spotlighted really by the 20,000 megawatts of carbon-free nuclear energy that we produce, the nation's largest nuclear energy fleet, and recognized worldwide for our world-class operations, achieving greater than 94% capacity factor for several decades. So really terrific operations there. And then we have the nation's largest competitive sales operation under our Constellation trading arm, where we serve over 2 million customers, both industrial and residential, with electricity and gas sales. So really, it's a company that's unique in its footprint today by having both the competitive arm and servicing urban utilities like I stated. So really pleased to be part of our company, pleased to be part of the discussion today.
Now, as you noted, nuclear generation is obviously the core of your generation portfolio. But nationally, and even in your service territories, many nuclear power plants have struggled to maintain economic competitiveness within the rules of those markets. In the last decade, about a dozen reactors have either been shut down or initiated the decommissioning process. How is that we are losing so many how are we losing so many reactors when they are the most reliable and only baseload source of emissions-free electricity?
Yeah, Chris, Brian is a fanatic of nuclear energy ever since college, University of Wisconsin, and working at many of our nuclear plants over the last 33 years. There's so much positivity around nuclear energy being discussed today, yet the markets that are outdated still don't reflect the attributes that nuclear energy provides to our electric grid today. Carbon-free energy, as Dr. Huff talked about, more than 50% of the nation's clean energy or carbon-free energy comes from our nuclear power plants, which provide 20% of the electricity for the nation. Exelon generates 1 out of every 9 carbon-free electrons that occur in the nation through our nuclear generation fleet. So really outdated markets that don't distinguish between an electron produced by the dirtiest coal emitting plant versus a carbon-free energy electron that's put on the wires. Those markets don't distinguish between the two. Power prices have fallen, which is good for us as consumers through natural gas production that's occurred in the United States. So really, our focus needs to be on recognizing climate change, recognizing the people want carbon-free electricity. The markets need to reflect the price of carbon. They need to have some policy reform around recognizing the attributes of nuclear energy. And even more so today, as I think about the events in Texas, and you think about the strains on the grid where nuclear energy shuts a reactor down about once every 2 years, and they'll put about a third of the nuclear fuel will be exchanged, and then that fuel resides for 2 more years, and those reactors can run uninterrupted for 2 years, providing resilient baseload energy, independent of fuel source supplies, independent of weather events that are very strong and hardened against natural disasters. And it really is a backbone of our electric grid today, but the markets don't reflect that.
Now, as you noted, nuclear provides a unique position within the various grids across the country, both from an emissions-free standpoint, but also from a base load reliability standpoint. And we know that more reactors are under threat across the country. How would more closures impact grid reliability and the emissions reduction goals that you mentioned?
Yeah, great question, Chris. It's really the independent regional transmission operators have responsibility to ensure reliability will be assured. And so far, with the closure of the nuclear plants that have closed so far, reliability hasn't been a concern. And but margins are shrinking, and they're shrinking very quickly. So from a reliability standpoint, not yet, but certainly in the future. From an environmental aspect, it's absolutely crystal clear what the closure of nuclear power plants do to our environment. If you think about just the states that we operate in Maryland, 85% of the carbon-free energy is produced by nuclear. Same in Illinois, 85% of the carbon-free energy produced by nuclear. In Pennsylvania, it's 91%, and in New York, it's greater than 50%. So if you think about one nuclear plant shutdown, how that sets the state backwards on their carbon aspirations, that will take decades and billions of dollars to make up, just to get them back to where they are today. It's remarkable impact on the states. And it's recognized both by environmentalists and scientists and industry analysts all agree that preservation is mandatory. Dr. Huff talked about it today. And we can't meet both our state aspirations, nor can we meet our administration's aspirations around decarbonizing the electric sector if we can't preserve these nuclear plants. And recognize that the nuclear plants that are shutting down, they're not shutting down due to operational concerns. They're shutting down due to economic concerns. Our nuclear fleet in the United States is running better than it ever has in the history of commercial nuclear operations in the United States. They're performing at top levels across every metric that you might look at. And the nuclear industry itself is not standing still. We have worked hard. It's a very collaborative industry, because we know issues that impact one plant certainly affect us all. And so we work very collaboratively together and have worked hard over the last 5 and 6 years to reduce our costs by over 30%. So it's not that we're standing still, it's just that the market doesn't reflect the value and the intrinsic value of nuclear energy today.
You noted that the closures that have already happened have not impacted reliability, and I think that's a testament to the utilities across the country working with their RTOs and ISOs. But I think it's also worth noting that at least in several cases, New England ISO comes to mind, where they found that if a reactor were to shut down, they would absolutely have reliability concerns, and that led the state legislature to provide a package to ensure that that didn't happen. And we've seen one-off state actions through many states, several of which that Exelon operates in order to preserve their fleet. But what exactly is the solution set to diverting from this path of fewer operating reactors? Like I said, many states have already taken action, but are these one-off policies the best way to address the problem? I mean, the issues gained greater prominence recently with Chairman Manchin and the White House signaling support for the fleet of existing reactors. But what would a federal approach look like, or what should it look like?
Yeah, great. Thanks. And we do appreciate Chairman Manchin's his outspoken vocal support for nuclear energy and the conversation he is creating. So far, we've had to rely on states implementing certain programs and policies that prop up nuclear energy, as they do to solar and wind, that they've also tried to develop in their states that create more renewable energy. And we recognize Illinois did it in 2016. New York was one of the first in 2016 by enacting a zero emission credit. New Jersey followed quickly after that. And we have seen other states contemplate it. We're back in the state of Illinois today discussing the importance of nuclear energy because, a year ago we announced closure of 2 nuclear plants driven by economics. They've lost hundreds of millions of dollars over the last couple of years. And given the market forward prices, they're expected to lose hundreds of millions more dollars in the future. So we had the tough decision last August where we announced closure of those 2 plants. In fact, the Byron Station just outside of Rockford, Illinois, which is arguably the best nuclear plant in the United States today, is less than 60 days from closure. And we know the impact on the community is huge. We recognize that every closure of every nuclear plant results in about 7,000 direct and indirect jobs that are lost. Property taxes, the Byron plant that I spoke of pays more property taxes to the local communities than the Empire State Building does. So think of the impact that has on the communities, and that how they'll have to react to that loss of tax base. So it's critical that we continue to look for solutions to support nuclear energy across the United States. It's important that we continue to work at the state level because that seems to be the fastest path now. But given all the recent discussion at the federal level, we're very optimistic about a nuclear production tax credit that has been carefully crafted, tailored to respond to all the policymakers who have insisted that the PTC itself only be available to those nuclear generators that need it. And it's on a sliding scale because we're not looking to enrich nuclear energy. We're looking to keep it around such that the markets can eventually reflect the price on carbon or some policy that recognizes the value that nuclear plants provide. So I think overall, we'll continue to work at the state level, but a lot of positivity, obviously, on the federal level is spoken to this morning. And we're optimistic that something will come. It's the important part is the timing part. Right now, we're working hard in Illinois because less than 60 days for closure for our Byron nuclear station. The administration of Illinois, the governor, and the legislator have contemplated energy reform in Illinois. In fact, they've agreed upon principles for nuclear energy, but it's part of an overall comprehensive energy package. It still hasn't come out of committee and hasn't been voted on. So there's nothing tangible right now for nuclear energy in Illinois. And we continue on our progress towards shutting that plant down. Disappointing, certainly optimistic perhaps that maybe something will still come about, but we have to react to the market signals. So I think working at the state levels, but now obviously aggressively working through the support of the federal government. Senator Cardin and Congressman Pascal have introduced the PTC as was spoken about. We're hopeful that'll work. It doesn't make nuclear plants rich. It simply keeps them in play while we catch up with market solutions.
Now, maybe one final question here. I'm going to ask you to take your business and policy hat off and put your engineering hat on. Not that you would ever take it off, but assuming that we can find a policy apparatus or continue to find policy apparatuses that can maintain the fleet. One of the big questions is how long can the fleet operate? And we've seen in the last 10 years moving from the initial 20-year license extension to an additional, so life after 60. What are the prospects of having the existing fleet, run to say 100 years and maintain that core baseload function while we, build the energy systems of tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris, because again, as an engineer that have crawled all over these plants, been in the dark spaces and the deep bowels of the plant, I can tell you these plants are robust. They are refurbished every couple of years. When just like an oil change on a car, when it comes into a refueling outage, we basically strip the car down to the frame and we rebuild it again. So while nuclear plants are in the 50s and 60s year old, they don't look like it, they don't operate it, and certainly the equipment in those plants are not old. And therefore, the prospects of running nuclear plants to 80 years, and then once we get close to the 80-year mark, moving it to 100 years, there's not a technical issue associated with those plants that long as we continue to invest and refurbish those plants to the highest levels of operational excellence. Like I said today, the nuclear industry is enjoying operations better than it ever has in the industry across the board.
Well, thanks, Brian. I mean, you have a big job, but I'm glad that engineers like you are out there doing this. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you for your time, Chris.
Good morning. I'm Dan Byers with the Chamber's Global Energy Institute. And for our last session this morning, we're delighted to be joined by John Hopkins, Chairman and CEO of NuScale Power, a leading advanced small reactor company based in Portland, Oregon. John, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dan. I greatly appreciate being invited here today.
It's great to have you. I think if there's an overarching theme that we've heard from the earlier speakers today, it's that it's really an exciting time for nuclear, and the future is bright. And I think NuScale is certainly a great example of that. So maybe just to open for those in the audience that are less familiar with NuScale and SMRs, just give a little bit of an overview of the design features and the applications and the business model. We heard Brian and Christopher talk about the economic challenges that traditional light water reactors are facing. What are the particular design advantages and the scope of applications that make SMR so attractive?
Thank you. The NuScale small modular reactor offers a scalable power plant solution incorporating enhanced safety, improved affordability, and extended flexibility for diverse electrical and process heat applications, as Dr. Huff had commented on earlier. The NuScale actually originated in the year 2000 when the Department of Energy provided a challenge to our current Chief Technology Officer, and it then was the head of nuclear engineering for Oregon State University. And the challenge at that time was, would it be possible, taking a clean sheet of paper, to develop a small modular reactor? And it was known at the program as the multiple application of small modular reactors. So he took on that challenge, working with many of the labs, and NuScale originated, from basically a bottoms-up design. They didn't take a big reactor and shrink it down. And so where we are today, NuScale is a true public-private partnership. We have over $1.2 billion of investment in this program currently, both thankfully with our U.S. government, Department of Energy, with the funding opportunity assessments, and our private investors, which are Fluor Corporation and Doosan and Sarens and others, a part of our supply chain. And to give you a perspective of the unit itself is contained within containment. To give you a perspective of scale, it's 15 feet in diameter, 77 feet high, and it will be factory built. It comes in 3 to 5 sections and can be shipped either via rail, barge, or transport via truck. So these will be built in the factory as the civil works will be done elsewhere, and then we'll ship them. And we can do this to any location around the world. That's why it's critically important that we have such a robust supply chain that we do, because we see a lot of opportunities currently internationally. The applications itself, we've had Dr. Huff commented on the international side as well as the domestic side. We've had energy ministers contact us and said, to meet with COP26 coming up and to meet our current goals for clean, emission-free, we've recognized we just can't do it on the backs of renewables alone. We need advanced nuclear. And so that we have the ability to help and complement renewables. When the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, we can help load follow, as they call it, and provide energy for renewables to allow them to operate on a 24/7 basis. So what we see going forward is, process heat, desal, hydrogen production is one. We're probably going to be announcing here, hopefully in the next month, a major consortium of multinational companies that'll be using NuScale as their energy source for hydrogen production. So, we're all boats are rising for our industry currently right now, Dan. So thank you for the question.
Great, thanks for that overview. And since you raised some of the international interest, why don't we talk about that? I think since NuScale received design approval from the NRC last September, it seems that interest has really taken off. You've announced the deal with the Korean energy services provider over the past couple of weeks, and several others that preceded that. It's really exciting, I think, when we think about restoring U.S. leadership globally and the potential to export technologies. What is the international interest here, if you could elaborate on that in terms of customers as well as potentially competitors, and what does the potential export market look like once all the regulatory hurdles are cleared?
I get asked often, how big is the market for advanced nuclear? I don't think anybody knows for sure, other than there's been numerous studies. Other than that, it continues to grow, and the market's already in the hundreds of billions of dollar potential range. What we're finding is countries that are, climate disruption is key, but they're also looking at energy for energy security reasons. I had a team just presented in Bulgaria last week at the 3Cs conference. We're in Romania this week. We met with the energy minister. So there's a lot of Asia is starting to really pick up. In fact, I'm leaving for Asia tomorrow for another round of investment discussions. As I said, we get 1.2. And so we're seeing more countries and companies looking at advanced nuclear as real opportunities, because having, as you stated, gone through a very rigorous Nuclear Regulatory Commission process and get licensed, it's opened the aperture significantly for us. And each of our module, we just recently announced a power uprate that each module is 77 megawatts electric, and they're scalable. So, if you want 12 of these, for 900, almost approaching a gigawatt size reactor, you can, or if you want 3 or 6 or 8, whatever configuration you want. And the other important aspect they're seeing over there is because each unit is independent of one another, you could have 3 or 4 providing electricity requirements. You could have others providing energy for desal or energy for hydrogen production. So that in cities of the future, put in 4 reactors, Dan, and then, as the population density increases, you can put 4 more in, or up to 12, however you want to configure it.
Thanks. You mentioned NRC, so why don't we talk about that? And I'll try to blend this question with one of the audience questions that's come in. One of the unique things from my perspective about NuScale is that it's truly a startup, and we typically don't think of startups in heavily regulated industries, and especially in nuclear electricity. But that's exactly what NuScale is, and you're having really great success so far navigating the complex regulatory process. What are the remaining steps at the NRC in terms of regulatory milestones, and when do you hope to complete those processes, ultimately move on toward construction and operations? And if I could, I'll just note we had an audience question come in that sort of gets at a broader issue at the NRC, which says, how can states and governors encourage investors to build nuclear plants when it takes almost 10 years to commission full operation?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we got licensed August of last year, and now we're going through a process with the NRC for a power uprate, which is very common in the industry. We hope to have that by 2022 in place. We have our first customer, Utah Association of Municipal Power. They're looking at either a 6 or an 8-pack. Their requirement right now for energy, Dan, is 2029 for commercialization. We're hoping to get our first module in the ground at 2027. So through the NRC, and it was a daunting, I have not come out of the nuclear industry. I was in fossil fuels for many years in engineering and construction, and I had no appreciation of what it took to get through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It was a daunting challenge, and we're a light water reactor, but there's a lot of components that we don't need that a large gigawatt site does require, but we had to prove it to the NRC. We have no need for AC or DC power should something occur. We have no need for operator intervention. Originally NRC thought we'd need 12 operators on a 12 module plants. They've now confirmed we only need 3 operators for a 12 module plant. We believe we can get to the point here eventually having no need for operators because of the passive safety design. So we're pretty comfortable where we are. We're also looking at the Canadian licensing process. We'd like to have another regulatory agreement. So, and UAMPS continues. They're doing bore sightings. They're moving forward. And we're also got other customers that are now lining up, particularly in the West, because again, they have wind, they have solar, but they're looking at advanced nuclear. So not only for NuScale, but other companies that are in the advanced nuclear arena as well. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's great. And I think in my mind, you're you're trailblazers in more ways than one, not just with your design and your business model, but regulatory trailblazers. And so you proved it can be done, and hopefully that's a sign of momentum for the many other designs that NRC will be considering. This week, maybe talk a little bit about policy, and we talked earlier in the session about the momentum, and there's really strong bipartisan support for nuclear, and we hope that continues. We've had NELA pass. We talked a lot about that. There was the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, et cetera. How important have those legislative vehicles been at galvanizing private sector support, giving confidence to potential investors? And then going forward, are there other policy actions from Congress or the executive branch that you think are really important for us to pursue?
Absolutely. I can say without a doubt, NuScale would not be here without the Department of Energy and the U.S. government, as well as our private investment. We won our first award under Secretary of Energy Moniz during the Obama administration for $226 million for 5 years. And that truly got us kickstarted. And what we're seeing, and it's been commented earlier about our ability to compete internationally, we are competing against state-owned enterprises, predominantly China, Russia. And what they bring to the table, Dan, is funding opportunities and financing. And recently, getting the XM quorum is very important. Also, the International Development Finance Corporation recently announced they've dropped their nuclear prohibition on financing. Many of these countries that they're looking for that are priority for IDFC is also priority for the advanced nuclear community. So does it totally level the playing field against state-owned enterprises? No, but it certainly helps in the competition. And we're seeing that. Countries that were exploring possible China or Russia are now looking more at the Americans and coming forward in some of these advanced designs. So the policies moving forward, we've had, since the beginning of the year, NuScale has had over 100 briefings on the Hill, virtual obviously, but 100 briefings, and we find great bipartisan emphasis on advancing nuclear in general, advancing and maintaining what we have already in the current fleet, but also bringing forward, as Dr. Huff said, advanced reactors need to be part of the overall mix in meeting our country's climate energy goals.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. Now, I'll note that the Chamber was proud to be vocal in support of those changes at the Development Finance Corporation,
Absolutely.
where they had really an antiquated prohibition on funding for nuclear plants. Well, I see we're coming up at the top of the hour. John, maybe in 30 seconds or a minute, if you could, any final sort of closing thoughts on your vision, your outlook for SMR technology, or anything else you think you'd like to leave the audience with?
I'm a strong supporter of all of our nuclear technologies coming forward. Will all of them rise to the top? Absolutely not. But some of them will, and that'll put American technologies that are extremely safe in the international market where we need to be. And also in our market where I see fossil fuel plants coming offline, the ability to use advanced nuclear to go in and establish existing assets that are already there, and let's say coal retirement or coal refurbishment, to be able to go in and use the existing workforce, because it's about jobs. They want to stay in these rural communities, and they have the existing infrastructure already there. And for a 300 megawatt NuScale plant, that equates to 270 high-paying jobs. And guess what? Of those 270 people, only 20 staff require degrees. They could be electrician is electrician. We can use those currently working. And this is where labor is so important for us. I recently had dinner with Sean McGarvey, with the president of the building trades, and he gets it. And so there is a coalition starting to build to really start promoting the U.S. industry in terms of advanced nuclear. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, that's on that note. It is exciting times. We thank you for joining us, and I will turn it back to Marty for closing remarks. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for joining us for what was another great discussion this morning. And again, I want to thank our sponsor, Siemens Energy. Now, we're going to be taking a break for August, but we'll be back on September 16th for our next discussion on how innovation will drive America's energy future. I believe you can find the registration in the chat box, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you.